Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Today on the podcast, we're talking to someone who started running very early in the 70s and into the 80s with great success at all levels, high school, university, and beyond. And then most interesting and most effective at an amazing life afterwards. We're in Michigan. Let's meet and welcome today Len Krichko. Let's introduce everybody with your running origin story. Len, when, how, and why did you become a runner?
Matt, I became a runner by accident, I think. I was a basketball player from a very young age. I think as soon as I could dribble a ball, is what my dad said. 3 or 4 years old, I played basketball all the ways up through high school. Before I got to high school, I was always very competitive in basketball. And I remember vividly playing summer basketball, playing on the playgrounds until it was dark outside, then going home late at night. I was playing hoops all day long. And at nighttime after dinner, I would put the garage light on and play another hour or two. My game really was basketball, and I loved it. But as I entered high school, I was told that basketball players had to go out for track and cross country. Well, I wanted no part of cross country my freshman year. So I avoided it like the plague and got into basketball season. We had a great season. I think we lost one game or two games. And the same team from sixth grade all the way through ninth grade, it was only one loss per season or two losses with one of our rivals. We had a phenomenal team. So when spring came after basketball season, I was told in no uncertain terms, I really needed to go out for track. One of my friends was always very competitive with me in the classroom. In eighth grade, we were in the history class of the person that would later become our high school coach. And that person and a football player were trying to beat me out in history class for the best grades. Both of them weren't as smart as they thought. We were correcting each other's tests. One was using a pencil and one was using a pen. And they tried to change their answers and self-correct to beat me. And Coach Paul Sanders took them both outside into the hall, read them the riot act, and both of them forgot the story until recently. We were about to talk about our coach being sick. He since then passed away a year or so ago, which was very sad. But I said, hey guys, you remember this story about history class with Coach Sanders? And one would not admit to it. They just chuckled with the story. But the redheaded one, who was the track runner, challenged me to join the team. And I had no idea. I had a cousin that was 2 years older than me, who was a junior at the time. And I said, what am I going to do? Sprints, jump, middle distance, long distance? What are you doing? He said, I have no idea. I think I'm going to go with the middle distance runners. So I looked over to my good friend with the red hair, bright red hair, curly hair. And he looked at me and he says, you'll never be able to stay with us. We're running up Route 18 in Hickory, up to the Corral, which was an ice cream store, and back past the grocery store. And I started questioning how far it was. I figured I'm not going to even ask the question. He said, what kind of shoes you got? And he looked down, he said, you're going to run in those? They were Chuck Taylor high top tennis shoes. I said, I'm fine. I'll be good. There was 5 or 7 guys, and he was going to run with us. Our high school coach, Paul Sanders, was a phenomenal runner, which we found out later. We really didn't know at the time at all. He was a high school state champion, we found out, of all classes in Pennsylvania. That's when it was A, B, and C. He was the overall champion when he ran in 1956. He went on to Westminster College in New Wilmington, PA, small college. As you know, then freshmen could not compete on a varsity level. So he practiced with the team, swam with the swim team during the winter, and then went on for the next 3 years to finish in the top 10 in the NAIA national cross country meets and also track meets. And then he swam on the swim team in between. And this all came out, Matt, a year or so ago when he got very sick and passed away. We started learning about his history. I still have nightmares of him yelling at us during, during track or cross country to move up. I was running in Cinder along Route 18 on the berm of the road, high top tennis shoes, legs hurting like hell, and got to the corral, made it all the ways back. I gutted it out. I felt like someone took a baseball bat to the top of my legs and back of my legs. And my redheaded good friend by the name of Dave Solian said to me, "How do you feel now?" "I'm really shocked that you made it." I said, "Oh, I feel great." There was no way that I was going to concede to him, but I didn't feel good. For the next 3 days, I was walking down steps backwards at the high school, never admitted to anybody. But I finally told my mom at one point when I looked down and looked at all the different shoes that they had on, I said, "Mom, I think I need a pair of running shoes." So that spring, man, I found out that I did like running somewhat. I didn't like long distance. I knew that from the get go that I wasn't going to be a long distance runner. I didn't mind the quarter mile or 880. And I believe that year as a freshman, I ran very well. I think I ran close to 2 minutes for the half mile. My cousin pretty much would run with me. He was a junior, and we would run a lot of the meets together. We had a great middle distance and long distance team at Hickory High School under Coach Paul Sanders. At one point, Paul's teams and us in cross country, which I started my sophomore year, we won 52 dual meets in a row without a loss.
Wow. Nice.
Len, let's place this in time and geography. What year was your freshman year, and where exactly in Pennsylvania was your school?
It was Western Pennsylvania, Matt. I was born in Sharon, Pennsylvania, and there were 7 little cities around Sharon, and one of them was Hickory Township at the time. It's now the city of Hermitage, Pennsylvania. Small, as you can imagine, blue collar towns around Mercer County, Pennsylvania. My freshman year was 1971 going into 72.
Len, let's talk about your psyche and competition. You were a competitive basketball player from as early as you can remember, competing in school with your buddies, good-natured. How driven were you by competition? How important was it to you in all these things? And how did you handle it whenever you did have a loss?
I always liked to win, Matt. I was very driven. I remember in junior high, outside of the team, it was a summer league, and it was 2-on-2 competition. The goal was to win the competition, and we would get red short sleeve sweatshirts with the basketball logo and our school name on them. And that was the goal. So my best friend who lived the street up from me, him and I against the world. And we were in the final championship. And he was so happy that we were in the championship, except when I tipped him the ball on the jump ball, believe it or not, we were playing full court. He started driving the ball, smiling, grinning from ear to ear, and he made the bucket for the wrong damn team. And I was screaming at him, "Stop, you can't go any further." He looked at me afterwards. He goes, "What's wrong?" I said, "You just scored 2 points." I said, "Do you want the red sweatshirts or not?" We went on. We did win the sweatshirts. And as of a year or two ago, Matt, I do have it somewhere packed away in a box. But every time I look at that sweatshirt and reminisce with my good friend, I think about how competitive it was, how I wanted to win. I did not want to lose. I was driven to win.
It sounds like you had great relationships with your teammates and your coach. What do you think you learned in the span of the first year in high school running, your first year in track, and the successes, the coaching? What did it take before you self-identified as a runner? When did that happen?
Matt, I really didn't even become a runner in my mind until my junior year. I enjoyed running somewhat because I was in better shape for basketball. I was able to run all day long until the cows came home. My cousin, who was 2 years older than me, Len Krichko, also played basketball. But on the basketball court, we were both guards. We could run all day long. We could play defense. We could do everything. When everybody else, when we were running wind sprints or anything else, we were very fit. And I embraced running for that because I felt good about my conditioning, that no one was going to be able to stay with me and I would be able to guard anybody and shut them down because I was better conditioned. My mindset was I enjoyed running to get to my goal to be the best basketball player ever. My sophomore year, we had amazing junior varsity basketball team. Only experienced a couple losses. I ended up dressing varsity a couple of games. I had great jumping ability as well. I could dunk a ball with two hands, and I was probably 6 feet at the time. We had an inter squad scrimmage going into my junior year. And in that inter squad scrimmage, I was trying to beat the senior guard for the starting position. The forward came down, who was about a 6'5", 6'6", big forward, came down with the ball. The guy that I was guarding took off, and he was trying to cherry pick for an easy layup. And I was trying to shut him down by playing the best defense I could by stealing the ball, intercepting passes, blocking shots. Well, I saw him behind me, probably 10 yards or 15 yards, catching this pass. Looked like he was going to go in for an easy layup. I ran as fast as I could. I pinned the ball by the rim, and unfortunately, I got bridged by him where it's a form of basketball where you sweep under the player, usually street basketball, dirty form of basketball. And I landed on the point of my elbow, shattering my elbow in my left arm. It swelled up as big as my upper thigh overnight. Eventually, that several weeks later, I was operated over at the Cleveland Clinic in the sports medicine. That ended my basketball career, Matt. I couldn't go left, couldn't do all the things I used to do. To this day, my left arm only has about 30 degrees to go to open fully. I still can't open it. And at the time, I didn't realize it, but it was probably a blessing in disguise because my junior year track, I started really focusing, especially in the middle distance, 880. Any longer distance, the mile I would run every once in a while, but it was actually too long at times, Matt. And I really didn't enjoy it. And I had those flashbacks of that first time I ran along Route 18, and I wanted to keep it. I was determined to be the best that I can, and I didn't realize how good I was. In District 10 that we competed in, we had a great high school runner, and we had great runners from our high school. Tom Herman, who later went on to Pitt and had a great career. Tom was the runner-up in cross country his senior year, but Tom was a 153, 154 half miler. So my junior year, Tom was first at the District 10 880 competition. I was second. He was 153 or 154, and I was right on his heels. And there was only a second or two that separated us. And then I realized how good I was at that point. We had a great 2-mile relay team. We won the District 10 championship my junior year. And then everything really started moving forward, Matt, during my senior year. We had success in cross country. Didn't enjoy it, but we were successful. And my senior year in cross country, I really started enjoying a little bit longer than 1 mile, going up to 2 miles. My high school coach had switched at the time. Coach Sanders had 2 daughters, and they were growing up, and he stepped down from coaching. So I had a couple other coaches that really influenced me. In basketball, it was Coach Phil Oman, who was the assistant coach, who really inspired me and wanted to be good. And he also was a track assistant. Then there was a football coach by the name of Denny Driscoll, who was also very inspiring and was the head coach. And Bill Motor, who was one of our greatest athletes to come out of Hickory High School in running. He set the mile record at 4:19, was recruited by Coach Doug Watts at Edinburgh. Bill, after his sophomore year, I believe ripped his Achilles tendon, could not run anymore. Coach Watts honored his scholarship, and Bill became their manager and also wrote all the track summaries and cross country summaries. Bill's a tremendous writer, became a teacher for a while, went to law school at night, became a lawyer, and is a practicing attorney back home in Hermitage, PA. But Bill came back, brought the Doug Watts system with him. He also grew up under Paul Sanders. So a lot of Paul Sanders coaching methods were brought over. And then Coach Driscoll had this football mentality. So he said to me early on my senior year, and also the cross country coach, John Rakita, had told me that they wanted me to get ready for cross country and for track. And they wanted me to run to school every morning from my home for an extra workout. So I ran 2.5 miles to school. My sisters would bring my clothes in so that I could change, but I ran and it was basically uphill for the first mile and a quarter and then downhill to the high school. It really led me to focus, to realize my potential. And then Coach Driscoll and Bill Motor really trained. I think my senior year was the first time again that I realized my potential. Bill Motor said, Len, we're going to have an indoor track program this year. And I said, great. What are we going to do? He said, just show up for practice tomorrow, right after school. Bob Habel, who was one of the football players and high school quarterback, who was also a half miler, will be working out with you and some of the middle distance runners. And the first day, Matt, that we had practice, he said, we're going to do 220s on the track. And I looked at him and Bob Habel looked at me and said, Bill, we don't have a track. We don't have an indoor track. He gave us 2 snow shovels and said, the parking lot, 120 yards, shovel it out, make an oval. Bob and I looked at each other and we uttered some unchoice words that I can't say. We did it and we kind of laughed along the way, but we shoveled the parking lot 220 oval. Then Bill said, we have 2 weeks to get ready for our first indoor track meet. We're going down to Pittsburgh. And I said, oh, great. We're running at the University of Pittsburgh. I said, on that beautiful track outside the basketball. He said, no, we're running at South Park in the stables. The stables? He said, yeah, South Park right off of Route 51. He said, you'll see. Just get ready. I think I was going to run the half mile or 1,000 yards. We pulled up and they looked like hangars from a small airplane field. And they actually were stables for horses to train in the wintertime. I said, what's that? It looks like a barn. And he goes, those are the stables. I said, and we're running in those. And this, as you can imagine, Matt, was a very uncomfortable ride from Hickory down to South Park. Was about an hour and a half drive in those days. And Bill had a very small Ford Pinto, and a couple of us were crammed in the star. So we had to get out, stretch our legs. Bob Habel, the high school quarterback, looked at me. I looked at him, and I said, "You gave up football, weightlifting for winter, and I gave up basketball for this." We opened the barn door. It was a slider, and all it was a dirt track with dust, and they called that the Dust Bowl. I looked at Bob, and he looked at me, and I said, "Bob, let's run our fastest and get the hell out of here." I said, "This is completely crazy." And Bill got a big kick out of it. We did really well. 2 weeks later, we ran our first real indoor track meet at Slippery Rock, which was an indoor track. We enjoyed it because it was a kind of a hard rubberized track. We ran some good times. We did well. 2 weeks after that, we ran down at Pitt, at Fieldhouse. It was where the basketball team played, and the indoor track was around that. And we played very well. But I think there were flashes at times, Matt, of my potential. And one of the great memories I have is when I was a freshman, when I started track, I was running a summer track meet, and it just came back to me over in Youngstown, Ohio. And I ran the 880. I think I finished second. Tom Herman, I think, finished first, or a runner from Austintown Fitch High School, Bob Lund, or Rich Camp. One of them had won, which was a great. Austintown Fitch was one of the powerhouses in Ohio. Hickory was one of the powerhouses in Western Pennsylvania and the state. Coach Sanders and Coach Mike Garcia from Austintown were good friends. So we shared a lot of practicing together and camaraderie over the years. I ran the 880. I was up in the stands. My sisters were running. Other people were running girls' events, boys' events. And I had a hand put on my shoulder, and a very articulate voice said, "Young man, you ran a very smart race." And I said, "Thank you, sir." He said, that was a really gutsy performance. You have a lot of potential. What grade are you in? I said, I'm a ninth grader. He said, stick with it. You have a lot of potential. Never knew who it was until I turned around. And it was the person that was signing our certificates that day. It was sponsored by Arco, the old gas station oil company. And it was Jesse Owens that was sitting behind me. And I almost dropped my mouth because I was just starting to identify, but someone had pointed out that's the multiple gold champion from the Olympics. And when he was being introduced and talking before the track meet, it was an AAU Junior Olympic track meet. That kind of inspired me to think about possibilities of running later in life. So in high school, we enjoyed our running. We were coached by some great runners. By running every morning 2.5 miles my senior year to high school was also after school with some tough workouts. And I was thinking about getting prepared for this interview about those workouts. Running 2440s was one of our favorite workouts, or Coach Driscoll's and Bill Motors. And when we really got fine tuned, going toward the districts and then the qualifiers for states and then the state championships, we were running those 440s around 63 to 65 seconds and usually around 65 seconds for 20 with a quarter jog in between. And when you think about that and the mileage we were putting in, we were putting in some great mileage, but some great workouts. And I'm not sure how many other high school runners did that. And as I was trying to reminisce about my success, I finished second in my junior year in the 880 and the mile to Tom Herman. Tom won both the 880 and the mile. Our 2 mile relay, our junior year, qualified for states. We did very well. My senior year, I was the District 10 champion in the 880 and the mile run. And in the 2 mile relay, we also qualified. And during that time, Matt, that high school quarterback I talked about, Bob Havel, he was our third leg of our relay. I was the anchor leg. And if we were behind, and usually some of the times we were by a school from Erie McDowell or Erie Prep, and we could be 100 to 200 yards behind. By the time Bob and I got the batons, we did very well. We usually caught the competitive group of first, second, and third, and we would pass them coming down the stretch and winning. One of them was so dramatic that I was told after that my dad almost flipped off the back of the stadium. He was cheering so loud and yelling for us. It was an exciting time. And my coach, Bill Motor, told me later, he said, Len, your dad almost flipped off the back of the stadium. He was lucky someone grabbed him by his jacket just in time. My dad and mom and my family were always very supportive. They were at all my track meets. Even in college, my dad did surprise me from time to time.
Len, before we talk about university career, let me ask you a little bit about this devastating elbow injury. Both psychologically, how did you move on from it, adapting to the end of your basketball career? And physically, how did it affect your running?
It was very difficult for basketball, Matt. I was very close to the guys I played basketball with. I felt this great separation and great emotional sadness in my psychological spirit of competition. I don't remember going to a game after that point. I couldn't go into the gym. It was a really awkward feeling during that time that I felt like I left my teammates down somewhat. I felt like I could still play, I could still be there. I didn't realize it, Matt, and I did attempt it later. And after college, I did play some basketball. Most recently, again, there was an advertisement here in Detroit with one of the community college coaches who played at Michigan, was putting out a notice about a 40 and over tournament coming up. And I tried to recruit college coach and several players from Detroit to play because I still feel I could play. And when I was in Cleveland, Ohio, I actually played in the men's league and we ended up winning the championship. And even with a bad arm, I was still able to play. I surprised myself. But it was very hard emotionally in high school, Matt, to overcome that hurdle. Eventually, I refocused my energy into track and I had a God given talent which I was very blessed with. I learned to embrace it because I remember my dad taking me vividly in the car and talking to me about college one day. What he did was take me on a short tour. He took me past the city library and said, Len, if you want to go to college, there's going to be three ways of you to go to college. Number one, as we went past the library, he said, academically, you're really going to have to pick your game up and you're going to have to be better academically if you could get a scholarship. And I looked at him, he looked at me, and I chuckled. I said, we know that's not going to happen. And then he took me next past the bank in town and said, or you're going to have to borrow money to go to college and be successful. And I don't know if you really want to do that. And then he took me up to the high school and took me past the track. He said, or you could get a college scholarship, help yourself out, use your God given talent, and make something out of yourself. And I'll never forget that journey that I went on that day, Matt, with him. And I thought about that. And I thought about his father, his family. My dad's family came from Czechoslovakia, and my mom's family, the blue collar town, and how during summers I would work different jobs and I would think about their livelihood of what they did in their lives and that I wanted to be successful in life and didn't embrace the thought of going to college at first because I wasn't the best student until later in life that I became better in school academically.
Had anybody else in your family in your generation gone to college?
Only my dad. My dad came out of World War II. He started working at a local plumbing shop, sweeping the floors, worked himself up to salesman by the boss's wife telling him that he could apply for the job that he saw an opening in the window when everybody else didn't think my dad had the ability. The boss's wife thought my dad was mannerly, clean cut, and could do. And he worked his way up to vice president of that company and then ended up working there for 45 years. During that time, he enrolled at Youngstown State University and then Penn State, Shenango Valley, and took part-time classes. Never completed his college degree, but I believe he was one of the first in his family to go to college. I have three sisters. All of us are 3 years apart. And my oldest sister, 3 years older than me, was the first to go to college. So it was something that I really knew that it was important. I had one teacher in high school that really angered me, talking down to me. And I can't remember vividly what the conversation was, but said something to the effect that I wouldn't amount much to life the way that I was going. And I kept thinking of that and determined to show that person. And then later at Allegheny Community College in Pittsburgh, Coach Cohen really challenged me when I was down once or twice in a class that I thought was too difficult. And I remember Neil was our athletic director and coach with Sam Bear, who was our coach. And Neil saying to me one day, do you have a pencil? I said, yes, sir. He said, do you have a brain in your head? I said, yes. And he said, Len, you are challenged every day with running for indoor, outdoor, cross country, whatever. You take those same challenges and that same mindset into the classroom. You can be successful. He says it's up to you. It's all mental. Get it in your head. Take good notes. Start studying at night. And he was very rigid in that. When I was thinking about going to Allegheny, he really challenged me. And I told his daughter this. Neil has since passed away 10 or more years ago. But Neil told me when I was visiting Allegheny, he said, I'm not sure you could really run with our guys or you could compete. And it really pissed me off. And I told his daughter, I said, your dad lit a fire under me. And I said, as I was going into my freshman year, I wanted to be the best that I could be. And I ended up being one of the top half milers that freshman year. And we went on, won a national championship in the 2 mile relay, which I was part of. And later we won some others and set some American records along the way. But he really lit the fire of getting me angry, motivated. And I still wasn't mad at that point into the long distance running a run. I actually hated it at times. And I really never ran anything over, I think it was 5 or 7 miles was the most I would run. Or
It sounds like Neil Cohen knew what he was doing when he said that to light the fire under you. I want to ask one thing before I ask you how you met Neil Cohen and decided to go to Allegheny about that arm carriage. Did it have an impact in your running style or physically?
Yeah, it was, Matt. Bill Motor told me, Len, sometimes you would, until you straighten out your form, almost look like a chicken wing with your left arm. And I was able to pull it in tight, run more relaxed, learn how to run with it. As I ran in the districts and then the qualifiers for state and states, Bill reminded me this most recently. He said, Len, the districts that we came out of, we were seated a certain way at the states. You ran the 880 qualifier, semifinals, and then finals, and you did the same thing in the mile, and then the 2 mile relay. I think we got out of the qualifier into the semis, but we didn't go any further. But I ran a total of 8 or more races in a 2 day span. And in the finals for the 880 in the mile, I actually won my heats, which I completely forgot. I thought I did. And reminiscing with Bill, he said, Len, you won your heat in the 880 at the state final. You won your heat in the mile. I ran a 154 in the half, and I ran a 424 in the mile. And he said that the shame of it was you weren't in the heat with some of the other districts, but I'm sure you would have finished in the top three in each event for states that year. So I ended up, Matt, not doing bad. I wish I would have been able to run against that competition.
Interesting. You were in Class A then, right?
Yes,
Right. So likely you would have been right there for the top two in the other classes.
I think so, Matt. I was so thrilled to be at states. I enjoyed the state championships. I went there once in cross country, twice in track to the state championships.
Let's talk about the facilities. Back then, everything was at Beaver Stadium. Had anything moved to Shippensburg yet?
No, it was at State College. As you know, Beaver Stadium was wide open, more or less, and it was very windy. I just have these vivid memories that it could be a wind tunnel. And then later in college, we competed at Penn State. And I remember standing up, running, I think, a half mile with a 30 or 40 mile per hour wind in our faces.
Yeah. And cross country, we were in State College those years. I think we may have been at the same course in the same race. I was in a small Class B school. I got a state medal in '74. We're probably on that course at the same time.
We may have ran at the same time, Matt, in 73. I think it was my sophomore year. And a state, one of those years, I remember State College golf course. And I remember the Bullsburg Inn or something, where there was a big cow out front, whatever. And we had a team up in room with each other, and we didn't have the best hotels, believe me. Just wondered if the sheets were ever washed.
I think I remember that cow. This is fun to go back and recall those places and times. I was on a basketball team too. There's a lot that's fun to think about. My high school basketball team, when I was a junior, made the Pennsylvania Class B Final Four, but I was just practice meet.
Wow.
Let's move on to your transition then. You said, okay, I'm going to college, one of those three ways. How did you decide? Who'd you meet? How did you make that decision?
Again, Coach Bill Motor, Coach Driscoll, and Coach Sanders. Coach Sanders and Bill Motor knew Neil Cohen and Sam Bear. So they were very instrumental in saying, Len, this would be a great opportunity for you. They are the top JUCO National Junior College team in the nation. Sam Bear was someone that I had heard of from a distance. He set all types of records, as you know, was a phenomenal runner. I got to meet Neil. I got to meet Sam. I liked Sam's easy demeanor, that he was easygoing, very articulate, very inspirational. And Sam was still competing at that point. I liked when I heard that he was training with the guys and that he was running. And then Sam and all the guys, we became very close. And Sam would actually work out with us. It was phenomenal to be in his presence and to be inspired, and then to have him coach us with his knowledge and going from the Bill Motor, Paul Sanders, Denny Driscoll, and then especially with Bill Motor having that Doug Watts influence. Bill did some of the same things. The pulse, he would take our pulse and have us ready to go again. And usually my pulse was very low. And some of my fellow runners weren't too happy with me because we had to go again. Bill was on that Doug Watts system, the training easy days, harder days. Sam had the same philosophy, and a lot of Sam Bear's philosophy was built after Arthur Lydiard in the New Zealand training system. And I really like that. I said to someone, I was on LSD in college, and they looked at me and they said, "What?" I said, "I was on LSD in college." "How the hell did you make it through college?" I said, "What are you talking about?" I chuckled. I'm sorry, long, slow distance. But I really liked Sam's methods. And I was the hangback runner because all these other guys in Allegheny were the long distance runners, and they were phenomenal. And we had guys from Virginia, not, I don't think any of them West Virginia, but a lot of from New York, Virginia. And then we started getting foreign athletes from Scotland, Ireland, Kenya. They were coming in and competing. And we really had a close bond, but we had great athletes. And as I've told people, Matt, over the years, our practices usually were tougher than the meets we ran in. We had such great workouts. And I remember as we would be getting ready for indoor championships or outdoor championships, Sam had us so fine tuned. And we worked out over at the University of Pittsburgh's indoor track and outdoor track that I could remember running 220s with Sam and with the guys, and we were floating around those curves. And 24, 25 to 26 seconds, just floating and feeling like we were on air. And we'd be running anywhere from 4 to 8 of those. And then a couple easy days before we would compete. Sam was probably one of the smartest athletes, runners, coaches I've ever met in my entire life.
Let's talk about the arrangement. Sounds like it was unanimous you and Allegheny might be a great fit. So you got there based on your talent. What was the arrangement? Can you talk about the payment and how you funded college?
Allegheny tuition and everything was reasonable and low, that we were on work study, that we worked through the college. I think all my years of college, which I have an associate bachelor and I went on to get a master's, I think at the end of all my years of college, 6 years or whatever it was, Matt, I think I ended up borrowing from the bank just a little bit of money that I had to for different living expenses. And I think when I had to repay, it was like $5,000 for 6 years of college. And I was on a payment plan of $78 a month that I made sure that I made that payment. That really was my focus of trying to do the best I can to help myself, but help my family out as well.
Were you paying attention to the bigger world of running? Of course, the explosion in the U.S. psyche was just happening then with Frank Shorter, Steve Prefontaine. Were you paying attention to the larger running world?
Not really, not until later, Matt, that it really became focused. When we competed on a national level at Allegheny, we knew who the national competition was somewhat, but our real competition was our teammates because we were like a junior Villanova University. And when we ran, and I listened to some of your interviews, and I remember one of them, it was called the International Invitational, and I think Kent State hosted it. It was us, Allegheny, Edinburgh competed, and some other schools, Kent State, Cleveland State, and Malone, Ashland, and I think some other schools that were really some very good middle to long distance running. We ran a meet against Edinburgh, and I think they beat us barely. In Allegheny, we were right behind them, and then we blew away the rest of the competition. Our competition from within was so great that I don't think we really saw the outside world, Matt, or understood that until later. When I was out of college, I started understanding who some of these runners were. And we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have laptops or computers. TV, you would see a track meet every once in a while. I remember seeing Sam Bear on the international track circuit running against Jim Ryan. And that's how I remember Sam and seeing some of that. But and then seeing the Olympics and so forth, which were very inspirational. And then I think Frank Shorter with Munich was inspirational. I think everybody became sense. Did you see Frank Shorter and Kenny Moore and some of those people that were competing? It was really exciting.
What about the relationships you had? I know the Allegheny team was very tight. What about your relationships with those teammates and your competitors of that era?
Yes. So to this day, we're still in contact. And then there's that outside group. And we were very fortunate. Northeast Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, there was a tri-state areas of some really outstanding athletes from Kevin Foley, Jeff Foster, Rick Sayre. When you stop thinking, Alex Cassich, who was one of my high school teammates, who was a couple of years older than me. Alex was an All-American at WVU, went on to run for Athletics West. Tom Herman, Ted Roop, Rich Kemp, Bob Lund. And you start thinking of all these great athletes. Rick Sayre's training partner, and Rick passed away 10 years or so back from heart failure and was great. He was training out in Oregon. His training partner, Danny Moneypenny, to this day is still in contact with me. And Danny and I talk about it at least once a month or text. And if there's a track meet on TV or on cable, he'll text me and say, Len, you have channel so and so on. It's on. And we'll talk about it. But we stay in close contact. And then Sam Bear and the guys at Allegheny, we had a reunion back in 2016. And I was trying to recruit all the different classes. But Matt, I think you may know this, over a 10-year period in cross country, we had 110 wins, 0 losses, and 1 tie, which was phenomenal, and several national championships in cross country, indoor track, and then even the marathon. As I started running longer distance, I remember after I was graduating my sophomore year from Allegheny, Coach Cohen called, and I think it was the beginning of May or June, and said, hey, Len, we need your help. And I said, what do you need my help on? We're running in the JUCO National Championship for the marathon in Dewatchak, Michigan. I said, oh, great, good luck. And I hung up the phone. And he called back and he said, Len, you hung up on me. He said, I'm calling. We need your help. I said, Coach, I've only run 8 or 10 miles at the most. I'm a middle distance guy. He said, listen, we need a team of 5 guys, 3 men score. We need you just in case something happens. I said, I don't think you heard me. I've only run 8 to 10 miles and I don't like running anything further. There's no way that I could run a marathon. And he said, Len, you're in great physical condition. You could do it. And I hung up the phone again. And my dad walked into the kitchen and said, what was that all about? I said, that was Coach Cohen. What did he want? He wanted me to run in this junior college marathon championship in Michigan. He goes, okay, when is it? I said, what do you mean, okay, when is it? I said, I'm not doing that. I said, you know how long that is? 26.2 miles. There's no way that I'm running. I'm not going to do it. No, not for me. And he said, do you know what that man has done for you? I said, do you know what Allegheny has done for you? What Sam Bear's done for you? They're asking for you to help. I said, I'll think about it. 2 days go by, and my dad's getting a call from his brother from Oregon, Len Krichko, and he's calling my dad to tell him that his son, Chris, who is in the same JUCO, he's a sophomore graduating, he's running in the National Junior College Marathon Championship in Michigan. And my dad's brother was calling to find out if I was running. So my dad gets off the phone, tells me, hey, Uncle Hillis called. I said, oh, great. Your cousin Chris Krichko is going to run in the. And he goes, isn't that wonderful? I go, oh, that's wonderful. Good luck to him. And I walked out of the room. He said, you haven't seen your cousin since you were 10 years old. I said, so? And he said, we'll go to Michigan. I said, okay, we'll go to watch. Bring a lounge chair. I said, we'll be all set. He goes, nope. He says, call Coach Cohen back. Think about what I told you. So I thought about it for a day, Matt. I called Coach Cohen and said, okay, I'm in. And I don't know why I said it or why I did it. I ended up running it, Matt, and my cousin Chris was a long distance runner and a good runner. And I think it ran in our family because all of my cousins pretty much ended up running or performing in track. Chris had run many marathons and was probably like a 240 or 250 marathoner. So I meet Chris. I haven't seen him for a long time. His sister came with him. We get to reminisce a day or two before the marathon and tells me, just use your head. He's trying to coach me up. Just use your head, use it as a training run, do what you could do, and maybe we could run together for the first 10 or 15 miles. We ended up running together, Matt, for the first or 15 miles. I never ran before. I was hurting just like I did the first time I ever ran down Route 18. I ended up running 2 hours and 50 minutes for the marathon. I finished 25th overall. I think fifth for our team. We won the marathon championship. And I think Wayne Kaufman out of Winchester, Virginia, one of my great teammates and good friends to this day. I think Wayne or one of the other guys, I forget who won. One of them won, but we won the team championship. And after I finished, Amos' career was just coming to Allegheny from Kenya. There's a photograph of me up against a building, I think it was a bank building in this city in downtown Michigan, completely exhausted. And again, I felt like someone took a bat to my upper legs and back legs, and I ended up walking down steps for 2 weeks, for the next 2 weeks. And then I started running again after the 2 weeks. And I swore that I would never run a marathon again, but later in life I did. I remember Amos saying to me, Len, brother, you did so well. I said, Amos, if you're my brother, you run this damn thing next time because I'm out. And Amos went on to have a great career and ran at Villanova after Allegheny and was one of the best steeplechasers ever in the world.
So that's great stuff with Len Krichko. We've got lots more to cover. That's episode 1 of many. In the next episode, we'll move into the college that Len Krichko went to next, and then his return to Pennsylvania with Slippery Rock and the successes he had there. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.